good about this. Azure. We should do a podcast on that.
I like
You're
how
on-
it's Azure too. It's like that's not a good thing.
Is it because you're on like a free website and maybe we've used up the CPU time?
Yes, but I don't. It's not like telling me that anywhere. Like I've got no warnings to say like you've used up your stuff for this month. So it might just be down. I don't know. It might just be Azure. I don't do anything.
Yeah, I understand.
Jess and Azure just don't get along.
Oh, dude, I know. I gotta get off Azure. Anyway, all right, we ready to go? We are broadcasting. All right.
Yeah, we
ready?
try not to mention too many things broadcasting.
Do you want me to tweet it out or no?
Oh yeah, sure. Here, hold on. Let me give you the link. You want the link, Andy? So this is.
We might get like that one listener.
You're actually.
Yeah.
Oh, I mean, people can listen live.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so they
we do
can,
have one or two.
Usually it's just people that know me.
so that's
wife.
you. I just Skyped you, Andy, the YouTube
Yeah.
link. So that's a link that you can like tweet out or whatever, and
Or not.
people can watch on YouTube.
I'm gonna wait until I see how it comes out. I guess. I'm optimistic, as you can tell.
It'd be no worse than the first time Jess and I did it together. So
Today we're talking with Andy Schramm about building quality development.
I just lost Chris. You guys hear Chris? Chris?
Yeah, I'm here. You guys hear me?
yes,
Did you?
Yeah,
Did
it
he
sounded
mute
like
out
you
in the middle of that?
If I say we're talking with Andy about building quality development teams, is that pretty accurate?
Yeah.
All right, there it goes. There it goes. One more thing. Hold
guys
on.
on my team might choose to, might disagree, but
Okay, cool. We ready? We
Hold
good?
on,
Everybody good?
One more
Thumbs up?
second.
not yet.
and you're gonna tell me when to press record.
All right, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm ready.
We're
when
waiting
you
for Chris. Todd, you good?
Yeah, ready to go.
All right. 3, 2, 1, record. Hello, and welcome to the Static Void Podcast. I'm Jess Chadwick,
I'm Todd Slater.
are. And I'm Chris Gomez.
and we are your hosts. We're recording this on the evening of January 24th, 2016, and tonight we are honored to have our first guest on the show, Andy Schwamm, and he's joined us tonight to talk about working with and leading a team of developers. So, Andy, before we get started, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hey, and guys, thanks a lot for having me. Really psyched to be with you guys.
Yeah, no problem.
And my name's Andy Schwamm, and I've been a developer for a while now, and I've been on teams, right? And I think I've been
Jess will let you start over.
Go ahead.
Take 2.
Who's breathing, by the way?
That might have been me laughing.
Okay.
Go ahead. Just pick up whenever you want.
Okay.
You want me to reintroduce you?
Should I say that part about it's good to be here again, or?
Whatever. I can. All of that was good stuff.
Okay.
You don't have to be nervous, man. We're just having a conversation. We can
This is
turn the
the part-
cameras off if you want.
This is the part I'll have a hard time with. Once we start talking,
Yeah,
it'll
I
be
know.
fun.
I know. This like semi-formal stuff is
Yeah,
always.
yeah. I hate to talk about myself or whatever,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
all right. All right. I'll pause and then I'll start talking again. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I really appreciate being on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Okay, so yeah, my name's Andy Schwamm. I'm a Microsoft.NET MVP and an ASP Insider, for those of you that know what that means. And I've been developing apps for about 15 years, web apps and different things. And I've had all kinds of different roles on teams. I've been a member of a team. I've been a unofficial team lead. I've been an official team lead, and I've been a manager of a team. And so we've had pretty good successes on my teams, and we've made some mistakes. We've had some successes, and
Yeah.
hopefully we'll talk about some of that stuff today.
Yeah. Nice. Well, so you mentioned a couple of things, right? You mentioned being a leader on a team, being a team lead, and a manager. So it sounds like you're kind of differentiating between those three. You want to elaborate on that? They mean different things to you?
Well, it's funny. Well, I mean, I think it's clear that being on a team, there's definitely a difference between being on a team and being a team leader. Not completely, right? You can have a lot of influence just being on the team, and everyone on the team should act like a leader. But there is something to be said for having that title. And everything other than that, though, I think is the same. When I've been a team lead or a manager, I don't think there's really that much of a difference what the title is. It's just, be effective in your role of leading the team.
Yeah. What does leadership mean to you on a development team?
Well, I think it means different things at different times, and I think that it means different things to. What's interesting is I think it means different things to the developers on the team as well, and part of the job is to figure out what the other people expect from you as a leader. It could mean a lot of things. It could mean setting the tone for the pace. It could be setting the tone technically. You can be a team lead and not necessarily be the technical lead. And so, there's different things there. Some, junior developers are looking for guidance on a career. I mean, it really can span all kinds of different things from choosing which JavaScript framework to use to helping people train and learn and, and sort of be a part of their career, right? And one of the things I try to do in that angle is I usually talk to people on my team about their career, and I actually will often say to them, you're not going to be working for me forever, and I hope you will. I hope you're going to stick around for a long time, but what can we do in the process of this job and our time together to make sure that you're more prepared for this gig and for whatever comes next? And so there's that whole mentor side of the team, but then there's also the, day-to-day technical leading the team.
Yeah. Move your mic down a little bit. Yeah, there you go. I think that's better.
You want to see my mouth more? Or?
No, you're breathing when you're breathing into the mic.
Sorry.
That's fine. That's good.
So let me jump in with the first question here. So Andy, what do you think is the biggest challenge dealing with team members as a leader that you ran across? And sort of what is the ways you deal with those?
Right. So, well, I guess it depends on again, the biggest challenge to me tends to be the non-technical side of things, honestly. I think that a lot of us often move up through the ranks, and then if you're a good developer, management will all of a sudden say, hey, guess what? You're in charge of the team. And that doesn't necessarily mean you're a good team leader. It meant you're a good developer.
Yeah.
And, well, quite frankly, I like to think I'm a good team lead, but I don't think that part comes as naturally to me as the technical side, and making like technical decisions versus sort of dealing with the problems on the team and things like that. That's probably the hardest part, and that's the part I guess I think most developers would, as developers move into the team leadership role, probably like the least. The fun stuff is, all the technical challenges and the technical guidance and the technical direction for the team.
Yeah, because sometimes, like, being the team lead will mean now you got to start dealing with PTO requests,
right.
reviews,
yeah, budgets,
right? And and budgets, and that's the part where you say, wait a second, is that what I signed up for? But of course, it's what goes with the territory, right?
Yeah, totally. I spend a fair amount of time these days working on just what you said, time off requests, reviews, just general managing of people, even sort of non-technical, just all the task distribution of like who's going to work on what, and like thinking about we use iterations, whether you call that agile or sprints or anything like that, whatever the iteration is going to be. Thinking about who's going to do what, like dividing up the work, and
you mean
all
you
that.
don't have a self-organizing team? Isn't that what Agile is?
Oh yeah, Agile.
Managed chaos. That's agile.
Agile is, at most places I work, it's just the thing that they put in the job description, and that's about all it is. I mean, to the company. I like to think we do a better job on my teams, but Agile. So, when I use words like, I want to be really clear that when I use words like iteration or there's a couple other things I think we're going to talk about today. I'm not specifically speaking about any Agile or any other waterfall or anything. There's just a word, an iteration. It's just
Right.
So what kind of skill sets make up a team? Is it just in this particular case, are we just talking about developers, or is the mix coming into play where, hey, our team also has some folks responsible for QA or the business analysis? Does that go together here, or are we trying to stick to just leading developers?
I think, is that a question? I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I'll just,
sure.
Yeah. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
I think that it's all those things. Personally, this is what I was saying earlier about the sort of the difference between the org chart leader and the fact that you are a member of a team and you can take a leadership role in there. So I don't think in any of the teams I've led there have ever officially been a BA or a QA person on my team, although we certainly work with them. And a lot of people have their team set up in such that way. In a true, let's go agile, and in a true Scrum team, you would have all sorts of different people working together. Most of the organizations I've been at, the team is really just a bunch of developers. But on any given project, we work very closely with BAs and QAs, and so I certainly don't do their reviews, and I'm not responsible for managing them in most cases. But how do I influence working with them is really, in terms of, I think, fostering good relationships is a really good place to start. Working together and just sort of being open for ideas and change and being flexible. And all those things are really important, but I've never actually managed those kind of roles.
Anybody else?
No.
That was fun.
Todd,
I'm not sure how far I'm supposed to go with these topics. Just keep
going,
talking.
man.
No,
Keep talking.
You did fine.
We will cut you off if you get too long-winded, but you're not going to get too long-winded.
Anyone who's listening on the YouTube is probably going to have a really... Is this normal for you guys? Is this what we would normally do? Or
Yeah.
You never had a guest
Yes.
before?
No, we never had a guest before, but this was absolutely our earlier shows.
Yes. So I guess the following question I have is, like Chris was talking about, they could have different members on a team and things. What do you think is the most important thing to get teams on track? What do you think is important that you as a team lead need to do so that things keep moving forward and good software gets delivered?
I think the most important thing, and thinking about and planning for this meeting, the one thing that kept coming up, I mean for this conversation, not for this meeting, but for this conversation, I was thinking about ideas. A lot of things all kept coming back to one thing, which is communication. There are so many aspects of a team, and there's different dynamics, and there's all kinds of things going on. When the communication works good, I think the team really starts flowing, the team starts gelling. We open up the lines, and people feel comfortable talking to each other about ideas, about possible suggestions for other people and things that, or it just opens up the flow in the conversations, and so we can have good, honest dialogue, and people can really participate and sort of be a part of the team.
Yeah. One of the problems I had in it's been a problem in a couple different places, but in one place in particular, there was a guy who basically just thought he was smarter than everybody, and every idea he had was the one that was the one that we should do, right? It was the one that we should pick, and basically there was no other alternative. And probably in a couple places that guy was me. But there's one guy in particular in one place that I'm thinking of where, I mean, he was just really, sometimes he would come across an idea that I thought was the best idea, but most of the time it was just way over-engineered, and this guy was a real true computer scientist, and he was all about the algorithms and everything was just completely over-optimized and over-engineered from keystroke one, and it was just very kind of frustrating. And that wasn't the most frustrating part, though. It was his attitude about it. His attitude was very blatantly like, I'm better than you. I'm not sure he actually literally came out and said that, but it was quite clear that's what he thought, and he definitely came close to using that term. But it was I'm better than you. I know what I'm doing, and I mean basically he was just a jerk. And
yeah.
he
so
was
when
smart,
the time
though.
came to pick something to do, and it wasn't his vision, you were finding that you didn't know maybe how to deal with letting him down? I mean, was that did it come to that level?
Well, basically, it was like everybody who had to work with him was so frustrated and didn't want to work with him that I really kind of questioned, in the places where this guy was incredibly valuable because we needed his skills, right? Because he was undeniably smart, right? Nobody, we might begrudgingly say it, but he was definitely smart. Nobody questioned that he could code. Nobody questioned that he was smart, and so he brought a lot of value to the team when he was off coding this super optimized stuff, right? But when it came to interacting and communication, to your point, Andy, it became detrimental because people just didn't want to work with him, and nobody wanted to be on his team. Nobody wanted to work with him, and so he ended up pretty much every task he had was he was just sitting in a corner doing something, right? And so I really kind of questioned, like, even though you could look at each of these individual tasks that he was throwing out and see, like, yes, he's bringing value to the project in those individual tasks, it felt like, and I had no way to quantify it, but it felt like he was just kind of bringing down the project as a whole. Like he was bringing down morale and therefore productivity, and it would have been so much better if he could work with somebody else as a team, and the combined work of those two together would probably be more and better than each of them individually. And I just felt like we were missing out on a lot there, and I could never really decide whether it was useful, valuable, in total, everything considered, like whether it was good that he was on the team or not, right? Would we be better off as a team if he was not here?
Yeah.
And have you ever had that situation, or or come close to that, or wondered that?
Yeah, I think I've been around some of those situations, and I've certainly had knowledge of those situations. This is cliche. This is about as cliche as it gets, but there's no me in team, right? Yeah. Unless you change the spelling around a little bit, but essentially there's no me in team, right? And so personally, I feel that this is a detriment to the team. Now, in a team lead role, sometimes you have true authority over the team, and sometimes you don't. So sometimes you just have to work with the players that are on the team, right? And you don't always get to make decisions. If I have my choice, this isn't a person I want on my team. It doesn't matter how good the development skills are, really. A team is, it can operate at such a great level when everybody's working together. And as soon as you introduce this dynamic to a team where they don't want to do things, I mean, it's great. For a while, you give them those certain tasks, like you say, you go off and write this particular application or this particular feature or whatever, and it works great. And you're right, the person probably delivers really awesome code, and at times that person is going to save your butt. But I think in the long run, sort of return on investment or whatever you want to call it, but when you average out the productivity of the team, will that person's wins outweigh the productivity loss and the fact that the team morale is probably affected by it, and you're not able to do the things you want to do as a team leader because of that? It really is just a problem. So then the question is, well, what do you? In my case, I think it's a problem, and so then what do you do about it? That's the tricky part, because it's probably not something you can let somebody go for, right? I don't want to be negative and go right into like, well, fire the guy, but really that's not exactly a fireable offense, like just being grumpy. Like, he's getting his work done, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Getting his work done. Yep. So, the old,
his only offense is being a jerk.
Right. So what I try to do in those situations is sort of split the team up, honestly, and I don't, maybe not even officially split the team up, but just keep the, let's say there's 6 people on a team, put 5 people and consider them a team, and let this one person just get all their awesome work done, be great, and be by themselves as much as possible, but really focus on getting the rest of the team up and operating as a team, right? And it's sort of it's unfortunate because that's a real. It only takes. Well, here's another cliche, right? It takes one bad apple to spoil the bunch. I'm going to be all about cliches tonight, but they're true. That the reason these things are there.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, morale is super important then, right? I mean, if your team is down, and it doesn't just have to be because of another team member. The team might feel defeated because of maybe a schedule that's been presented, or maybe just a problem that's been presented that everybody says, boy, this is really not what we want to be working on or should be working on, but yet it's really important, or at least we've been told it's really important to work on.
Yeah.
Yeah, morale is a critical thing. And one of the things I like to do, thing I was thinking about in terms of this conversation and ways we would have communication, I was talking about communication being key. I am a huge believer in a retrospective, in that process of having a retrospective, and anyone who's done sort of Agile Scrum stuff might know what a retrospective is, but it doesn't have to be an Agile or Scrum retrospective. But the point is, taking stock in what we did over the past week, 2 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever some reasonable amount of time is take stock in that and have a retrospective. And there's a time, Chris, to say, like, let's talk about some of the really positive things that happened over this time. Because, yeah, morale might be down because we're working on some project that's not maybe the, like, cool rock star project that the team really wants to be working on. But what we can talk about in that retrospective is, well, let's talk about the positive things. What did we learn from that project? Well, and usually we lead it off with, well, we got it done, which is a great thing. Like, it's over. And turn it sort of the negative into a positive and, lighten it that way. But then, start to focus on there's always good things that happen, even in these lesser liked projects. I don't want to say bad projects. There's projects that we just don't necessarily want to do sometimes. But
or even you just might feel defeated because it's been a tough slog. It doesn't necessarily mean that the project was bad. It's just, you were in a bad patch for a while. And I know I'm the kind of person that I find it easy to focus on what to improve and then sometimes forget to celebrate the accomplishment, and I'm trying to get better about that. But certainly, I think sometimes it's easy, especially if you have like confidence in your own work, it's easy to forget to celebrate the accomplishment because you just say like, okay, yeah, good, we did it. But yet I think maybe the team as a whole needs that as a whole from every member, not just like, okay, guys, this is how we'll get better. Well, then now it sounds like, boy, when is ever good enough?
Yeah, so in that retrospective process, it's just such a time, and it's not even just the, if you've been through, you guys have probably been through that kind of process before, but it's not just me as the team leader speaking about what I think went well, but hearing from everybody else. And then, to tell you the truth, there's that camaraderie sometimes in the negative side of things that come up in a retrospective, where, like you were just saying, sometimes you go, oh, I'm not the only one that was feeling a little down about that particular part. Oh, okay, I'm not crazy, right?
Bonding over how much it sucked.
Bonding over, right, and bashing that one manager who wanted us to do that project or something, having a little fun with it. But then what we try to do is try to take anything that's negative and turn it into an actionable item.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's nothing we can do about it, but sometimes we try to talk about the things that we didn't like about that iteration, and try to see if we can avoid that problem from coming up again.
Right, and even if there's nothing that you can, even if there's nothing you can actively do about it, you can at least be aware of it, right? So like next time it comes up, you can at the very least just be aware that it's happening rather than letting it get you down or.
Right, and how can we maybe even mitigate it to some degree, or sort of be prepared for it and say, okay, well, we have a strategy dealing with this. We got through it before, we know what to do, and we can move on. But I think it all goes back to the communication. And unfortunately, the guy in your example, Jess, is not helping that communication process, right? He's just sort of he or she is getting in the way of that process, and sort of blocking everybody else, which is kind of a bummer.
Yeah, a year or two after I was on this team, after I left this team, I actually came across a book called this is a family show, but the title of the book is The No Asshole Rule, right? And it's basically saying like it just lays down the law and says no, there's no room for these people on your team. Like they are so detrimental to your team that it's not worth any work that they're putting out, right? And even reading that book, I'm still kind of on the fence. Like it definitely pushed me a lot more in that direction of saying like, nah, it's not worth it. But even then, like looking at the stuff that this guy, and I keep saying guy because in my case it was a guy, could produce, he did some great stuff that like I'm not even sure the rest of the team could have done. But that was like once or twice, right?
Yeah, usually there's another way to get the project done too, right? Let's face it. Right. And to be fair to him, like in your case, we're all replaceable. So anytime you start thinking that one person is sort of too valuable or irreplaceable on a team is usually a mistake, because anytime I've even found myself in that position where I thought to myself, wow, I'm pretty important on this team, you got to stop and realize, you know what? For whatever reason, if I leave, 2 weeks later, someone else is going to be in that spot, and they'll struggle for an extra 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and then everything's plugging along just fine. And that would have happened if that person was off your team.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny because as I become a manager, as higher up as a manager, and you start to tell that to your manager, and those managers start becoming higher, they start seeing that as a really bad thing, right? When you describe, when you're kind of lower in the totem pole, and you describe somebody else on the team as like irreplaceable, that's a positive thing. That's, hey, they're doing a really good job. But then when you get higher up and they're irreplaceable, they're like, no, we gotta. That means that the team is either structured wrong, or there's too much kind of proprietary knowledge on this person on the team, and we're relying on them way too much. And so if they left the company, we are just completely out of luck. Like, we're just messed up, and it's going to be difficult for us to recover. That's a really bad thing for a business to be in. So I become more and more sensitive to that too.
Well, one of the things I think you really have to start doing with a team, with any team, whether you're new to the team or you just finally realize you're in a situation like that, is cross-training. Now, if you're talking about a specific skill set, because you talked about proprietary knowledge, right? And if you're talking about a particular skill set, one person is just really good at something, that's a little trickier. But if you're saying this one person has been kind of owned this part of the code for the past couple of years, and that person is really the brains behind it, then you're literally leading yourself into a problem that can come about in so many ways.
Yeah, and everybody else is afraid to touch it.
Well, people are afraid to touch it, and people don't want to touch it. You don't have collaboration in that code, and so typically when you don't have collaboration, you've got a lower quality of code anyway, I think. And so really what you need to start doing is getting cross-training in on the team. Cross-training, I'm talking about not necessarily technical cross-training, but application cross-training or whatever. Other people being familiar with the way the code is in different places and having a piece of it, and really rotating the work around. And we going back to what I was saying earlier about divvying up tasks and things like that, which is one of the fun parts of being a manager. But you really have to think about not allowing the code base. We try to have a rule that there's no code ownership, and of course. Sounds really good, and if push comes to shove, when you got 2 weeks left on some work comes up, what's the first thing you do? You lean on that one developer, say, "Oh, Todd worked on that for the past 6 months. Let's just give that one to Todd again," right?
Yep.
But we don't want to do that. We really want to force ourselves not to do that. We got to break that pattern, and get the whole team up to speed on all the different applications, or at least as much as possible. And I guess it depends on the kind of group. I typically have groups of teams where we're not just managing one piece of software. But even if it's one piece of software, you can look at it as one, having feature ownership would be a bad thing as well. But you can take that from the feature level up to the many applications in the portfolio and who's familiar with them, and just really get everybody doing all kinds of different things and sharing the work.
Yeah. So you're actively doing that on your team? You're actively cross-training, and you're conscious about it?
Yeah, we're very conscious about it, as a matter of fact. There's nothing accidental about it. It's to the point where right now we've got one developer who's been working on a particular thing for a while, and as that's been wrapping up, I've actually said to the team that this person will not be working on the next feature. We know that there's another feature coming out. The person will not do it. I'm really clear. I say, hey, there's nothing wrong. Yeah. Everybody's doing a great job. But it's in all of our best interest to not have that person do the next feature in this case. We also make sure we spread around all kinds of other work, such as deployments. Who's handling bugs a particular sprint, or defects, I should say. Whatever this is, we got to spread all this work around so that people don't get bored. People are having fun. People are sharing. People are learning, and we can all replace each other when there's a problem, or we can all help each other when there's a need. And we're being really specific about the cross-training these days, and trying to make sure that everyone's up to speed. And it's not easy, especially in my current role. We've got a decent-sized portfolio of applications. Off the top of my head, I don't know, let's say 10-ish or something like that, which isn't like hundreds, but there's some of them are pretty big and some of them are smaller. But we have to make sure that the team is really able to handle problems. And you find out as soon as somebody's on vacation. We just made it through the winter break, and immediately, as soon as someone's out for a couple of days, all of a sudden there comes the problem, and we're able to resolve those things quicker if we're cross-trained. So it pays off.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, as a manager who is kind of assigning tasks or overseeing that, it is, I can say that's one of my personal detriments, is that it is just looking at that sheet and saying, I know this guy is going to get this done, or girl is going to get this done in one day, right? And anyone else on the team is going to take a minimum of 2 days, maybe more. I just don't know. It's the unknown versus like this person is going to knock it out because they've been doing it for the past year. And it's just really, really easy to fall into that trap. And I've had difficulty getting out of it. But it sounds like that's the answer, and it sounds like that's been working out for you to basically just make it very clear that just say, we're gonna. And is that a cost, right? I mean, is that have you been seeing that as a cost of saying, this person who's effectively the expert on it, we're not going to put him or her on it the next sprint, and we're going to put this other person on it, and they may take 5 days versus the 2 days that the original person would have done. Are you seeing it? Are you seeing it cost that much? Is it that kind of difference, or do these new resources come on and really just kind of consistently surprise you and just it isn't even as costly as you would expect it, or a little bit of both?
It's definitely a little bit of both.
Okay.
Sure, I'm surprised from time to time. It's definitely costly, and so what we have to do is be strategic about when we make the call. So we'll say, we have a light iteration or light sprint coming up. Hey, now is a good time to make one of those changes where we say we think we can fit that in now. The key is to not let it go too long. So you have to take those opportunities when you have them. Otherwise, you sort of fall behind the gun. It is definitely costly to do this. I would sort of go back to the conversation from earlier where we're talking about that particular developer on the team who you say he's so good. And I say, well, you gotta get rid of it. It doesn't matter how good the person is. You're going to pay a cost. Yes, there's a cost with it. There's a cost with switching these developers around on tasks as well. But it pays off in the long run. It's like, are you looking for the short-term gain or the long-term gain? And I try to be looking at the long-term. You have to look at both. You have to say, for this iteration, how do we solve the problem? But how do we also solve the problem for the long term? And play all these things off each other and just take the opportunities when you can. It's not always simple. I would say the harder part about it is sharing my own work, my own workload, and my own responsibility, and delegating that part out and making sure that the rest of the team is prepared in that way. Because when two of the developers on the team, I say, I want you guys to sort of switch tasks for a while and that kind of thing, I find it, like you say, you see it, and you see things slow down, and you feel like, oh wow, this is going to be a problem down the road. And it usually works itself out, but I find it's worse when it's my own tasks that I'm giving up, because we all, in our brain, we all think we could do things so much faster. Have you ever noticed when you give a task to someone, you go, oh, it's just a couple hours, And if I was, and then it takes longer, and immediately you go, oh, if I was doing this, I'd have this done in 5 hours,
Classic.
But of course, anytime you're on the other side of it, someone gives you a task and they say it's going to take you 5 hours, and it takes you 15 hours to get it done. And so I find when I'm delegating my own work out to people for this cross training, for this concept, I find it really painful in waiting for it to be done. I'm saying, oh, I could get it done faster. And the truth is, I won't get it done as fast as I think I would.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was just going to say, that's not you judging other people. That's you going into it yourself. It's going to take me 5 hours to do this. Course, and then 20 hours later, you're like, oh, man.
Typical developer optimism, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's hard.
I think it's really important for the team members. I got this advice very early in my career because I was beginning to take ownership of too many things. Yeah, I was doing well on a few things, but then I'm starting to juggle a lot of balls at once. And so I got this advice pretty early that you got to figure out how to sort of ship your work, and I don't mean like shipping products. I mean build it in such a way, whether this comes from building, documentation, whatever applies to how your team works, so that you can give the work away. it can go to another developer, and you're not going to be worried, oh yeah, they'll be able to pick it up because I either left appropriate notes or it installs really well. The installation is so easy that no one could get it wrong. I mean, I'm picking up different ways that you ship your work, but I've gotten to the point a long time ago that I don't want to ever feel like I'm indispensable. I think that goes against human nature because you want to feel like you won't be let go of a team or a project or a job, because that's a very scary thing. But it's actually, what you really want to be is so good at quote-unquote shipping and being able to hand off work. That's going to be your job security, because you're the person that, like, wow, we get complete work from that person. And that, again, that doesn't always mean shipping a product. And besides, the fact of the matter is that when you become a desired employee, it's not even just your own company that's trying to keep you, right? Other folks are going to be saying, hey, we'd love to have you over here. So you have to gain that confidence that it's okay to do your work in such a way that you're very confident another person on the team can just pick it up. It'll be fine. Maybe a couple hours of pairing up and sitting together in a cubicle or screen sharing just to sort of hand it off. But if it takes, days and days and weeks, then, well, you've held it too close to the vest.
Yeah, you have to definitely have. Well, you're saying that it's about confidence, right? It's really hard to have confidence. It's really hard to be that comfortable and feel good about yourself that you're going to be successful and that they're going to keep you around. I mean, we're pretty fortunate. I think we all live in a certain area of the country here where I think the job market is pretty good, and it's not always that easy for everybody. Some people need to be a little more protective than we are, and I guess that's understandable. But the skill, there's so many skills that you gain, right? And just giving up that power and saying someone else can do my job, that's a skill that you've now gained that you take to the next place, and the next manager is going to appreciate you coming in with that skill as well, right? And like you said, your skill and your value in the company is that you can get things done, you can move on, you can pass things around. But we have to be careful, getting sort of on the technical side of things here, because we've been talking very much about like sort of soft skills and things like that. But design is so critical, right? We talked about how can we hand these things off. If every application is written completely different than the next one, or every feature is re-implemented in such a new way that no one has any idea what's going on, that's a really big problem. And so I think that that's one of my big roles in the technical lead. We were talking about lead, but then there's the whole term of like architect. And I think often that is one and the same, and I often fill that role of sort of team lead and architect. And so I think we need to talk about that part of things as well, is that it's your responsibility as the lead to make sure that the software is sort of all fits to some degree in a box, right? It all fits, and you're using similar patterns where possible without getting stale, keeping things current, keeping things moving forward, but writing the code in such a way that other people, if we're talking about code in this case, that other people can pick up the work.
Yeah, no, I think consistency is crucial. This is a comment I've been making on my team a lot lately, because I have a couple of legacy applications that have been around for a long time, and we've only recently started doing peer reviews. And so I'll be leading a peer review, and I'll be looking at a chunk of work that just happened over the past week or so in this big in this code base, and I'll be looking at it, and I'll say, well, this is bad. I mean, this is just horrible. And then we'll look through the rest, and we'll kind of compare it to the other stuff that's in there, and I'll say at the end, I'll just kind of say, look, I'm not saying your code was bad. I'm not saying you did a bad job. You were consistent with the pattern and the way that we developed the rest of the application, which is awesome. That is the best thing you can possibly do. So in this chunk of work, you did a great job being consistent with the rest of the application. It's just unfortunate that is horrible, right? We as a team need to revisit this pattern and code practice and code standards and everything, right? And so it's kind of like a mixed message, but I really try and kind of put that across. Like, yes, consistency is number one. I'd rather you write consistently bad code than than some awesome code. Yeah.
I said that this week to somebody. Like, I know it's not the way we want to write this, but if we start changing things, we're really going to mess things up for everybody else because it's just going to get too confusing. And so sometimes you got to go with that consistently bad code.
So how do you bring new patterns in, right? So in that example that you and I just described, where we have these just bad patterns just existing in this legacy code base, I guess it doesn't have to be legacy or not, just a code base is people have been consistent, let's start with that assumption, and been consistently what we're calling bad, and we want to kind of move that forward. How do you do that? What kind of tools, and I use that term broadly, what kind of tools and approaches do you use to address that situation and get these new and quote better ideas in?
So I think that you have to assess the skills, first of all, of the team, right? So you have to think about, well, what can we do? Where is everybody? And am I going to go to some new bleeding edge thing that's going to immediately leave everybody behind? And let's assume we have a large code base, right? It's really hard to bring in a whole new pattern, say, from the ground up. I mean, are we rewriting the application or not? I'm guessing we're not from that part of the conversation, Jess. I'm guessing this is like, all right.
Yeah, let's say it's so big that rewriting it, just flat out rewriting it, is not, as a big project, is just not realistic.
Yeah, so is quitting an option?
Well, I've heard that phrase. I use that phrase all the time. Change where you work or change where you work. I think I learned it on .NET Rocks. Right? It is my favorite phrase because it's so true. But no, assuming that you are trying to take, the first path and change where you work before you change where you work.
So I think the first thing you got to do is really take an honest look at that code before we start bashing that code. I like to look at it and say, okay. So 4 years ago, would I have written that code? Because there's a good chance I might have, because we changed patterns, and we're all like so cool because we use the latest pattern, but we weren't using that pattern, when this code was written, and so it might not be that bad. Then look at what the problems are, because one thing I found is that when we're looking at legacy code, we always think, oh, this is such an easy problem. Oh, come on, this can be made so simple. And then when you get in there and you write, sure, the first 80% of it goes great, and then you get to that 20%, right? All of a sudden you go, that's why the code is such a mess, because there's a real problem here. Something's really messed up.
It organically grew to solve the little warts that were coming up now and then.
Right. So, but we still want to fix it, right? Because the point of the question is that we know that the code is bad, and it's really hard. To me, the best thing is consistent code and patterns that are sort of easy to follow through the code, and so you can solve problems quicker because the code is clean, right? And that's usually what I'm looking for, and I think that's what you're talking about here. Is like the code should be cleaned up. So how do we introduce patterns? One thing I think is good is to take a team approach to it, and not just come in as the technical architect or the team lead and say, well, here's how we're going to do it. But maybe pitch it out to people and say, how do you guys think we should do this? Let's get some input from everybody. And I think that it's really important to do that, because when you're making big changes, you want to make sure that everybody understands why you're making changes so that they really embrace them and so they can really carry that pattern moving forward. Otherwise, what's going to end up happening is this new code is going to look just like that old code in 2 years, because everybody's going to add to it and mess it up again, right? So, let's not make the same mistake that original developer was probably trying to do the right thing, or maybe not. Maybe the other developer, was no good. I mean, there's so many reasons why the code could be a mess. But let's take a team approach to solving the problem, and what do people think would be the best way to do it, and then start biting off chunks. But the key, I think, is to make a decision, to decide, and not just look at one. This is a simple example here. That we threw at the way the question is thrown out. But are we talking about one class or one method or one feature? But the point is not to just look at that one class or method or feature, but look at the whole application and think, well, what is the change we want to make, right? And then think about what are the small steps we can make to start to make this change without gutting the application. Maybe we can take some of these dependencies out and move them to some different places. But the point is not to just start making the change, but to say, as a team, let's decide on a long-term plan. Let's not just say, hey,
plan it out. Yeah,
however you want to do this, I don't know. You can make it better. Just make it better. And then the next developer comes and works on another feature, and you say to them, just make it better. And sure, like you were saying earlier, sure, if I look at each one of those people's code, I'm going to, wow, this is better. This is really nice. And I look at the other person's and go, wow, this is really nice too. But hey, these are not the same better.
Right.
And we'd like them to be the same better so that we can, sort of keep going. And when things are the same, it really just makes our lives easier. So I think the important part is to take a planned approach, take a long view of it, and then break that long view up into chunks and say, well, where can we start? And what would be an easy win to start moving this code in the direction we want it to go?
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, because for me, bad code, I got a lot of opinions on what bad code is. You can show me 10 lines of code, and I'll have a lot of,
9 of them will be bad.
Yeah, right. But really, the bad code that I'm talking about is when your application becomes unmaintainable or more costly to maintain, right? So every feature request just starts taking longer and longer and longer just because you're piling on, right? And so it gets to more of a redesign rather than, do we use spaces or tabs? It's more of a higher level, we need to, like you said, break up some dependencies here or something like that, and start introducing these kind of big structural changes just to make the application as a whole, the code base as a whole, more maintainable. So it just doesn't cost us as much to make these changes that we need to make.
So here's a question I've been thinking about. We're talking a lot about different, like, taking software and making it better and things like that. What if you're in a situation where you want to introduce a new framework or a new set of technologies? You've decided, okay, we want to move everybody to ASP core now, or whatever thing you can think of comes to mind. How do you approach that to get your team up to speed and mitigate the risk that basically your whole team needs to learn something?
Can I add on to that?
Go for it.
Let me just say, you are maybe not the junior developer, but you're, quote, just a developer on a team. You're not the team lead. You're not in any you don't have the title of team lead, or you're not kind of widely regarded as a team lead. But you are, quote, just a developer on the team, and you want to introduce this new technology and get it adopted because you think it'll be a good fit.
Yeah, so the first thing you got to do, I think, in these cases is be persuasive to some degree. You got to show the value of this. What we used to do at one place I worked, we had a term we used to use a lot, and to talk about socializing our ideas. So, before any code is written, you got to start looking. Let's just say this is Angular, right? Oh, well, guys, I've been reading a lot about Angular, and it really seems like this is the way people are going. Start to sort of pitch it out, get people excited about it, and you have to show some value in it. But you also have to sort of, to some degrees, take some ownership of it as well and say, I'm going to go the extra mile, right? I might not be the team lead in the case Jess is specifically talking about. So I'm going to make sure that I'm going to, bone up on this particular topic and make sure that I'm knowledgeable about it. As a manager or a lead in this situation, what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, you have to explain to me how that's going to solve the problem better than the way we're doing it now. Right? Show me the value of this new technology or new pattern or new framework. And that's not to say I'm not pro-change, right? I'm big pro-change. I always want to use the latest and greatest of things. But I will challenge anyone on my team to prove the value of the thing. Once they prove the value of it, and I have to do the same thing to the team. When people often ask me, or am I using this framework or that framework? And often my answer is, if I introduce another framework, the team's head's going to explode. And you can't do that. You just can't always change things up. You have to some degree, say we committed to something. I can use an example here. Some of us, I think, have talked about this topic, but I don't use Angular right now, and this is not a problem with Angular in any way, shape, or form. I think it looks really cool, and one of these days I'll start using it. But right around when these things were getting popular, we started using Knockout. And, to some degree, you got to stick with something for a little while, because you can really burn out a team if you keep changing things up. But getting back to the question, so you socialize it for a while, you prove some value, and then usually you got to wait for something small and say, hey, here's an opportunity on this one feature or this one maybe new one-off application. And if you write a little small utilities, if you're in a kind of team where you do a lot of smaller utilities, you're in luck, because those are always the kind of places where you can say, hey, this is really short. It's just a small project. Let's pilot something here. Let's put in a new framework. Let's try to use it here, and see how it works out. And assuming that it works out great, then we say, well, then maybe we can bring this into some of the bigger projects. Yeah. But I think you have to sort of pilot these things small. You have to be really careful to not make people's heads explode. You can't do everything new, even though I certainly would like to.
I think every developer would.
Yeah.
On the service.
Well, no, you know what? Sorry, not every developer would, and that's the other interesting thing, is that a lot of guys don't want to do it. A lot of developers are kind of happy with the patterns or the platforms or whatever it is that they're using as is. And it's tricky to bring them along for the ride and keep them motivated to try new things, because not everybody on the team is always motivated to do the latest and greatest. I've worked on teams where people were just kind of happy to keep things going, the way things are, and not want to change. And you really have to be prepared to move them along with the team, or then they're going to fall. If not, then they fall behind, and it sort of becomes the opposite of that original experience. The original situation Jess was talking about, you had the guy that's too good and didn't want to do anything, and then the other circumstances, you have somebody who's really like falling behind, and that's another problem too.
Yeah. So how do you deal with that? I mean, how do you bring them along? How do you encourage them or motivate them to learn? And this is another question that I had teed up, but it just kind of fits in right with this. It's slightly different, but would you rather have a hero or a rock star, or just an average reliable developer, right? And so basically, if we're this person that you just described, who just is happy with the patterns they know, and they know them pretty well, and they can knock things out, that person is the person that I'm kind of referring to as the reliable developer, right? They know what they know, and so that means that you can accurately kind of predict how long it's going to take them to knock stuff out. But then you have this rock star who's able to knock out a lot of things very quickly, but then sometimes just kind of takes forever on some things, I guess. I don't know. But they are the ones who is going on, and they're out in the open source world, and they're keeping up on the new latest and greatest stuff, and they're bringing those ideas into the team. Which one of those would you rather have? And assuming, and it's a big assumption, that you'd rather have the rock star, how do you encourage the average reliable developer to kind of become that rock star? Is it possible? Can you do it?
So I don't love the term rock star developer, right? I'm sure you don't either. It gets
I know.
thrown around.
That's why I used it.
It certainly gets thrown around a lot. So what is the definition of a rock star? To me, some of the traits you talked about is what makes someone a rock star. That person who's reading and learning all the time and up on things, but is also getting things done. Of course, that's the rock star developer. There's a great need out there for developers who are just getting things done, right, and doing things and solving problems in the same sort of basic ways. But in terms of motivation, this is what I've found about motivation for developers. You can give a developer a nudge when they're getting a little complacent. You can give them a nudge to go out and learn something, but you cannot change a developer's sort of motivation. If they're the kind of person that doesn't want to learn new things, what I found is they're not gonna. Now, again, that doesn't mean we can't give them some nudges, because we all get to a sort of maybe in a little bit of a rut. I'm not talking about the developer that's in a little bit of a rut, or isn't maybe inspired to learn this one particular pattern. But I'm talking about a developer who has never taken an opportunity to learn new things on their own. Just coming in and saying, hey guys, guess what? We're going to do all the latest and greatest. If they don't sort of attach themselves to that process, on their own, there's really not much you can do to attach them to that process.
So,
yeah, cool. Go ahead.
So what do you guys think about this? Putting together a team, how big is too big? How many developers is too many? Even a number is fine. It can be a stab. This team is too big. 12 is too big. That's I think we'd all maybe right.
Yeah.
So
Well, when you're talking about a team, are you talking about a project? Yeah, I assume you're talking about a team that's working on a project together, or are you just talking about I manage 12 developers, but they all do different things and for different
well, a
groups?
team that you're going to lead to get stuff done. I mean, I suppose obviously like the VP of development leads all kinds of developers, but at the granular level that I think we're talking about here, I don't think so. So
Yeah, I've worked at places where a development manager, might have, a lot of people underneath them. They're really just, but they're not leading the team on the
no.
day to day.
And what
And
you're
so-
talking about is mentorship, guidance, specific leadership on a specific products or projects. I think that's the granular level that we've stayed at the whole hour. And so that's the level I'm thinking is when is it too big? When have you ever said, I don't want to grow this team anymore?
I don't think I have, but I don't think that's been because I don't think it's been the opportunity hasn't come up. In other words, the team has just organically stayed the right size. I mean, what do they say in Agile? I think it's 6 or 8 or something like that. Does that
Pizza.
sound right?
Pizza, yeah, pizza. 2 pizza teams. I think
Two.
That came from Amazon.
That's
The
a
team
good
needs
one,
to be as small as you can to feed it with 2 pizzas.
because everything grows when you do that. I talked earlier about communication. Communication gets harder, right? A sprint retrospective becomes harder. Sharing ideas and collaborating and getting everyone to buy in on things gets harder. Getting everyone a chance to have their voice heard gets harder. Doing that many reviews gets harder. We're going to talk about the reviews, but I think that that's the right number. Is somewhere 6 to 8, and I've typically had 6 or less. And I think that it works, right? You can have those people around a table, and everybody can get their say, and it does prevent, I think, problems. And there's lots of people who lead lots better and bigger teams, and I'm sure they're really successful on it. But I don't think that's for me. And again, some of that, I can let's be honest and say there's different skills involved in doing different things. And so if someone has the skill to really do that, I don't know if that's the average person, the average developer that gets promoted up to be a team lead and to be a manager and all these things. Probably, even if there was even if the standards where people were saying, oh sure, 15 people is a great team, I don't think the average developer that comes up sort of through the ranks and through the system is really good at that many people in the first place, right? I think that's a whole other thing. I didn't go to school to be a manager, but I think that being productive is a number of like 6 or 8 is a really good team to be productive with.
And when you talk about 6 or 8, you're talking about developers, right? Not like business analysts or QA. You're just talking specifically about the development team?
Well, I am. I think more than that is problematic. I mean, I really like the whole idea of the full team. Yeah, sure, QA and all those people. If you can keep that to an 8-person team, then that broader team is going to be more successful too. Right. So what's the team? I think if you're really just focusing on development, you're getting up to 8 people. It's getting pretty tough. And once you start adding in most of your meetings, you're going to have all those other people in there anyway. And so it really is going to get pretty complicated. So I would say, if you had to have the team, 8's a good number with everybody, or maximum at that level.
Well, so say you have just a larger project and you need more people in there. Have you ever come across a situation where you have cultivated, you've taken all of these steps to cultivate and grow your team so that they are really high-functioning, high-performing, and now you have to work closely together with another team, be it another team of developers or even just analysts or QA people or whatever, and they're, for lack of being diplomatic, they're just pulling the team down, right? They're just slowing the project down, right? You've worked so hard to make your team efficient, and they're just bringing you down. How have you run into that, and if so, how have you dealt with it?
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff has certainly happened over the years. The one thing to go back to is that the bigger the project, and you guys know this, right? The bigger the project means the bigger the team. So it's not even about the team, but let's just look at that big project is just destined to do worse than the small project. Every time you get involved in these big projects, they're so problematic. And so, before we even get into this position, I'm going to be an advocate for reducing the scope of this thing in general, right? And I think it's sort of important to do that. And I just feel like I have to say that. I know we're talking about the team side of things, but I don't want to get to that position because I know that when we do get in with this big project and a lot of people, it's just going to be, there's going to be more problems and there's going to be more delays because these are the ones that are always going long, right? But having said that,
get it wrong.
I made my... What's that?
Just more opportunity to get the design wrong, more opportunity to mess up the requirements, more opportunity to miss really, really important things to the business that just somehow slipped everybody's mind, which is odd because that seems to happen more when there's more people involved than less.
Yeah, so let's just say I make my pitch and I tell everybody that I really think we should break this thing up. But that would end this conversation, so that's probably not what we want to do, right?
That's an answer, though. It really is.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a viable answer.
Because, I mean, when I was throwing out the numbers earlier, like, I was going to say, you know, we were talking about team size being like 5. It's because it's partially, that was my number, and it's because I want to keep projects small and focused. I get afraid of trying to chew off too much because I just think it rarely ends well. It usually ends with just so much to be desired and expectations not met.
Well, so in my scenario, one of these teams was possibly another kind of skill set, right? The QA department, right? So I assume we've been talking this whole time pretty much about software developers, a team of strictly developers. But now you've involved this other team of, let's say, for the sake of argument, of QA people, testers. And so, you know, you haven't really groomed your team to have that skill set, and you need that skill set, and this other team is kind of bringing you down. But the way your organization is and the corporate politics and all this stuff basically demands that this other team approves your stuff, right? How do you work with them when you basically ultimately have to?
Buy them lots of pizza? Was that the thing before? So,
pizza and beer?
Yeah, you know, sometimes you just have to play the cards you're dealt, right? So, yeah, we can protest as much as we want, but here we are. We're in the situation where we have to work with another team that, you know, might not be doing things the same way we are. So we have to do the best we can, and sometimes under bad circumstances, and that's where often a real team lead comes in. I think this is where, and if I'm reading the scenario right the way you're saying it, my job as a lead or as a manager is to really now step in and help smooth out the problems, right, and not put that burden on the team. This is kind of what I always say, is that my boss's job is to keep people out of my way and to, you know, run interference, right? And so in this case, if I'm the team lead, now I'm the one who has the fun job of running the interference. Yeah. But it's important, right? My team, I want their morale to stay good no matter what the circumstances is, because let's say at the end of the month or whatever, we're coming back and my team's going to, you know, I don't want to get them burned out on this situation.
Yeah.
So I'm going to run interference. I'm going to be the good guy and try to work with the other teams and be persuasive and be understanding, try to show them the light, try to explain why we want to do certain things the way we want to do them, and, you know, make sure that I listen to their point of view, because one thing I've learned over the years is I come in sometimes, you know, let's say cocky or cool with my ideas because I'm like, you know, I know the best way to do everything, of course, right? You know. And then I listen a little bit and I realize, you know what, those guys do have some pretty good ideas. Yeah, they have been doing their job longer than I've been doing their job, and so I need to listen as well.
Yep.
And remind the team that everybody's got different ways of doing things, and just try to, you know, keep spirits up and keep everybody happy, and like you said, what do we say? Buy more pizza and beer. You know, and try to get through it. But, you know, it's the manager's job is to run the interference where possible.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things I've done. One of the mistakes that I've made the most, one of the worst mistakes that I've made, is coming in and kind of discounting the knowledge and the experience on the team, and really just coming in and basically saying, I know how to do solid. You guys don't. So let's do solid. And they're just like, well, you know, we've done this way for good reasons.
Yeah, you got to listen. You know, we don't have all the ideas. That's the whole point of team, right? I try to talk to the teams that I lead about, you know, having their input, and their input is valid and important, and their ideas are going to be heard, and I'm going to listen to what they have to say about it, and I'm also going to knock those ideas down where necessary, and just like I want them to knock down my ideas. I think that's that process, and this is the thing, is that when we build this great process up on a team that we're on, and we know how to sort of, I don't want to use the word criticize. I'm trying to think of a better word, but sort of like debate. Like we can debate, and I'm sure you guys are like this too. For, an hour, the simplest point of the thing, but we're not offended by it, right? Because we all know we're really just trying to get to the best thing. But then you take that process and you go into a room with people from another team, and you don't have that sort of, things don't gel with them that same way, right? And so that's part of the problem of going to that bigger team. But I want my team to understand that they are owners in this whole process, and that they can have input into the everything we do.
Do you think it's important, and this is to everybody, do you think it's important to get that passive member of your team who will just sit in the meeting and look, they're going to listen to what everyone says, and they're going to go to work on the design or path that has been chosen? Do you try to get their ideas out of them? Do you try to get them to be assertive?
What do you guys want?
Any of you, yeah.
I think it depends on the person. I mean, you're getting into almost the psychology of human nature. Ideally, yeah, you want to try to get out their ideas because they probably have good ideas, but sometimes it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's you got to make a good effort, but sometimes it is, you can't focus just on them and ignore the rest of the team either. Sometimes you have to just let the quiet guy do his work and be done with it, as opposed to trying to spend all day peeling the onion or trying to get him to open up.
Yeah, I like to set the tone of the team, basically, right, and just really focus on the team as a whole, and maybe set everybody down in a room, and as I'm making the point that everybody's ideas are heard, and there's no stupid ideas, and you are not your code, I may look at a certain person a little bit more than others, just to drive that point home, right? But I try not to point out or draw out anybody in particular, but really just set the tone as the team. Again, it kind of goes back to that point of consistency, right? Like everybody needs to be acting the same way, and if at the end of the day individuals choose not to voice their opinions as loud, you can't force them to. And I try not. I feel like it's even worse to force them to do something they don't want to do, regardless of the fact that those ideas might be really good. If they don't want to voice them, then you shouldn't force them to.
Yeah.
What about you, Andy?
Yeah, I think you need to know your team pretty well too, right? So it's in this mythical team, am I with them is this my first day on the team, or am I working with them for a year? And so if I'm working with them for a year, then I'm going to know their personalities, right? And one thing you really want to look out for is to remember is, why is that person not jumping in on this conversation? It seems like something they would be interested in. Maybe they have a problem with the idea, and they're not really feeling good about getting involved in the conversation, or what's the circumstance. So sometimes the best time to do that interaction is maybe on the side, and to talk to somebody on the side who's not maybe jumping in, and you want to find out, like, why aren't they jumping in? Are they like, no, everything's cool, oh my gosh, you guys had good ideas, I didn't feel like I needed to say anything? Or are they like, well, I didn't even understand what you guys were talking about, so I didn't want to mess up that conversation, and that's a missed opportunity. So you got to be really careful to not miss those, I think. But in general, there is some point to saying that if people aren't going to put their ideas in, then their ideas aren't going to be heard. And, there's a limit to how much we can always, like you said, we can't always focus on that one individual. But you got to know the team and know what their personality traits are like, and make
That's
sure
a good point. Yeah, that's the one exception that I do take with when I do try and set the tone as a team. But when we're having a discussion that I know that one person in particular is going to feel strongly about, and they're just not talking, I won't call them out. I won't embarrass them in the meeting, but I'll say, like, hey, you've been very quiet. What do you think about this? And I'll just directly ask them, and half the time they will say, well, you know what, I just kind of think this is all wrong, right? And it'll be a great conversation. And they didn't know when to just jump in and say, guys, I think this is all wrong, right? And then other times they'll say, like you said, Andy, like, oh, no, conversation was going great. I didn't really feel like I had anything to add. I do feel strongly, but you guys were saying it all.
That rarely happens, though, right?
Yeah, right. So I do have one last question for you, Andy. And I like to set the tone on the show to be a lot more very practical of like what can we go and start doing tomorrow, right? And so you've said a lot on the show about communication tools and everything, you've said a lot on the show about communicating effectively and having the team being efficient and kind of gelling. Are there any tools? I always hate to place too much emphasis on tools. But at the end of the day, I mean, some tools really do help you kind of do things better, right? So are there any specific tools that you really like to use that you depend on or you think are really crucial to helping the team work efficiently or productively or whatever, right? Be it communication tools or build tools or code standards or anything like that?
Well, there's tons of tools that I think really can help. On the topic of communication, I mean, I think there's a couple tools that really can come in handy, and maybe this isn't a tool in the way you're thinking of it, but I'm going to go to the first one and say, in our case, Outlook or the calendar. And so the first thing I think you need to do is, have certain meetings that are recurring meetings, right? Whether that be a retrospective, I like to have daily meetings. I really like to have conversations flowing. Some people don't like meetings, and I get it. You can't have meetings on every topic all the time, but I like to have regular meetings to make sure that people's voices are heard and that everyone knows what's going on in the team. And so that's why I'm a big fan of a daily, type of stand-up meeting, and I'm a big fan of retrospective and things like that. Another tool that I'd be a big fan of, whatever you're using to accomplish this, is something to handle code reviews and sharing code amongst the team. In our case, it's Visual Studio, and we use Visual Studio code reviews to do. We use it a lot to share code amongst the team and get people talking, right? And that's one of the first ways to get people sort of collaborating is to say, I want people to take a look at my code and use Visual Studio, or there's lots of other ways you can do that depending on what kind of code you're writing. The whole point is just really getting people together. That meeting, people say, oh God, a meeting, but some of the meeting, let's face it, we also joke around a little bit in the meetings too. They're not like super hard and super structured, and it's that like face to face, like when everybody just works on their own, then they're not really working as a team. I guess that kind of makes sense, right? But I really mean like about bringing people together. You have to sort of like force the team to be a team sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? It might not just happen organically. Sometimes you got to put a little effort into it. And I think bringing people together by meetings and those kind of tools. The other tool we like to use, and again, there's other flavors of doing this, but OneNote is a great tool that we use for shared notes and collaboration. We put a lot of things into OneNote, and everybody can kind of take a look at other things and that people are writing, documentation or whatever it is, or process guides that we're writing, or just sort of sharing things, right? And other tools, I don't know about any other tools that I could think of off the top of my head that would sort of fit what you were saying, though.
Okay, cool.
So the one last quick question for you, Andy. You said you've been doing this for 15 years or so, and you've been in different roles and things. Would you say to yourself, thinking back 15 years, you wish you knew now as being a team lead that would have sort of helped your career, or kind of career advice you'd give to someone maybe starting as a team lead now, like what to prepare them for?
That is a good question. I would think a couple of things just sort of like popping in my head. One of them is that idea of not being afraid to share ideas, right? To take ownership of things and sort of do the research and figure out different ways to do things and sort of be forward thinking and try to like motivate people by showing and understanding that you don't have to be the leader of the team to be a leader. You don't have to be the leader on the org chart to be a leader. And I think that's an important thing for a lot of people to realize is that everyone on the team is sort of a team leader, I think, in their own way. And so, really just sort of be out there, be open for new ideas. Just because something seems wrong to you the first time you hear it doesn't mean it's wrong. And you take some time to really understand the other point of view. and then say, huh, like we were talking about before, you might think you know everything, and there's only one way to do things. But there's a lot of ways to do things, and so, listen to what other people have to say.
Awesome. It sounds like a show.
Yeah, sounds like a wrap.
Yeah, and you listener, what do you think? Do you have any tips or tricks or war stories about dealing with software development teams, leading with them, being on bad teams, whatever? We'd love to know. Please leave a comment on the website, staticvoidpodcast.com, or send an email to comments@staticvoidpodcast.com. And as always, if you have a topic you'd like us to discuss on the show, please feel free to let us know through those same channels. We want to make sure that we're talking about the things that you want to hear about. Todd, Chris, thanks for the chat.
Yeah, thanks.
Andy, thanks for being our very first guest. We loved having you on,
Yes.
and it was
Awesome.
great chatting with you.
It was fun. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. And thank you, listener, for spending the time with us. We hope that you enjoyed it, and we look forward to seeing you next time on the Static Void Podcast. Doop, 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 doop.
All right, stop recording.
And stop. Awesome.
Wait, was
So-
I supposed to record this?
That was
All right, that was
guys, let's do it again.
all right. That was the test, Andy. You ready to do it for real now?
So it was how was that? I
It
mean,
was awesome. Dude, that
That
was
was good.
freaking awesome. It was awesome.
I sometimes wasn't sure, like, you guys would say, like, anybody answer the question, and that's where I was, like, awkward. I'm like, am I supposed to answer the question?
Yeah, no, for lack of anything better, it's definitely you.
That was mostly just me trying to get more of a panel and less of a Q&A at times.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool, right? I mean, it's funny that some of the things I had, like, some notes and some ideas, and, you guys were asking questions, so some of the stuff came up and some of it didn't, and
Yeah.
it was kind of cool. I mean, I don't mean that in a bad way. It was kind of. I hope the conversation was interesting, and
Dude, it was awesome. You friggin'
was
nailed
great.
it. Yeah, and it's funny because, like, when you started screwing up in the beginning, that's just what we all did. It's just awkward. This whole, like, setup is just awkward, and it's like once you start talking, you're just talking, and we're just,
right.
we've all known each other for what, like 10 years now at least, and so we just start talking and have a conversation and record it.
Yeah, you try to sound smart though. It's like, well, I've recorded things before, and it's so different. Like, I'll stand up in front of a group, but when you stand up in front of a group and you start talking, it's not permanent.
Yeah.
You can't rewind on it. I mean, I play guitar
Oh, I know.
and sing, and when I record stuff and you hear it back over and over again, you hear that same mistake. But
Yeah.
I'm just playing a guitar. I make tons of mistakes, but it doesn't matter because it goes by so quickly that it's gone.
Yeah.
But when it's recorded, that
Yeah.
mistake is there, and that's the
Yeah.
pressure,
Yeah, I know that pressure too, because I do the lynda.com training, and so I literally script out every freaking word, so that I know that I nail it. But I've never scripted out an in-person presentation. Just go in and just wing it.
Just go winging it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We tried the script out thing. It
We
became
tried- it was
too scripted.
Awkward. Yeah, it was robotic.
So, we ended up staying very much on, like, soft skills, I think.
Well, I mean that's leadership, right? I mean.
Yeah, it's leadership. I mean, I was wondering where we were going to go with it, because, you could also say, like, as the team lead, like, are you bringing in patterns? Are you doing, continuous delivery? All those other sort of things that go along with, like, development. But this was a fun conversation to have. It's good to.
We started to get into that, but honestly, it was just more important. Like you answered, right, and it was basically your answers were just more important. The answers you were giving were more important. The soft skills were more important than those tools, right?
Yeah.
The nature of that was your answer, so you just go with it.
We found it better to have a good to keep things not specific, but in the same general area instead of trying to deviate off the things. 'Cause then it opens up another hour conversation on continuous integration.
Yeah, that's a whole other
exactly.
show. Like,
That,
how do
that
you
was
bring
just
in
nice for the
continuous
show. We were
integration?
all over the place.
Yeah.
So, are your guys? We're not recording this anymore, are we?
Well, we're broadcasting. We're not
Still
recording. You can kill
broadcasting.
you can kill
Are
the
you guys?
recording.
No, I was just curious. My kids are off. Did you guys get schools closed or what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mine are too old.
What a pain.
Both
Interesting.
my daughter's and my wife's school district closed.
Yeah, so that's my saving grace too, like yours, Chris. My wife's school district is closed, so she's home and so I don't have to, I'm not stuck.
Yeah.
Because I assume I'm going to work tomorrow. The roads are fine today. I don't know what
Yeah.
Yeah, I was surprised. Cool.
I said I'll be working from home tomorrow anyway, just because. But that's, I find out that my one daughter is off, and then I find out that my other daughter is off, and I haven't found out about my wife yet. I'm just like, okay, let me know when you find out. And then she finds out, like, yes.
By the way, we're still broadcasting on video.
Yeah.
She's never gonna watch this. What are you talking about?
Yeah, but you never know.
That's funny.
I want you to go up. Actually, I do have a question for you, but once you're done with the video part.
Question for Jess?
What?
Yeah.
You're not asking me any more questions. I'm done, right?
No,
more questions for me.
No, you weren't supposed to stop recording. This is the fun part.
This was a lot of fun, and I mean, after I get off, you guys can talk about how it really was. But I'd be happy to join you guys anytime you want. This was definitely fun.
Yes. So we're still trying to figure out what the show is, right? Like, so Todd, Chris, and I, we got like this nice kind of back and forth, and it's great, and that's been working out for us. I mean, the three of us all having like a panel and trying to talk can get like, we hit an hour no problem, and like we sometimes we sometimes have to cut off just because we're going so long.
Yeah.
And so like having a panel of 4 people, like it just doesn't seem like it's going to work. I don't know. We should try another one. We should bring you on and have a panel of 4 people where we all kind of talk evenly. But so like having you on as the point I'm trying to make is having you on a guest was awesome. Like where you just kind of talk the most, and basically you talk for as much of an hour as possible. And absolutely, we'd love to have you on again for that. And I don't know about you guys. I don't know about Chris and Todd about having you on as like a panelist. You want to try that out at some point?
I wasn't suggesting. I mean, I wasn't suggesting that. I'm just. I
would love it.
The only thing I felt bad is that I feel that your guys' voices weren't heard as much, and this is your show. And I get it. You're asking me questions and things like that, but I know you guys have great thoughts on this as well. A couple points I thought maybe I would say, well, what do you guys think? I wasn't really sure, to turn it around on you guys, but you guys have a lot of. You know more about this than I do, probably.
Well, don't worry. We'll have the Andy Schwam response show. Now that Andy's not here to defend himself, we'll just tear him apart.
It's hard though, because like I think one of the things we learned with 3 is like, let's say, even like you said, we might ask you first and then try to each put in our thoughts. Well, there's 8-10 minutes.
Yeah.
Right.
It's tough. It is really hard, and so. I kind of agree is that, like, I think my goal was not to make it totally interview, but then I don't think it can be totally panel.
Right.
It's hard, because otherwise you're looking at hours.
Maybe a pattern would be something like, let's say Chris asks a question. Tell me to shut up if you want. I'm just throwing out ideas.
No, we're still trying to figure this out ourselves.
So Chris asks a question to me. I answer a question, and then Todd follows up with his idea or something like that, right? Yeah. And then Jess asks a question to me, and then Chris follows, something like that. In other words, the guest, but there's always one of you guys getting some thought in there as well, something like that.
Yeah.
And as opposed to all 3 of you guys, thoughts on each thing, because you're right, that would take hours.
We kind of tried that in the past, but sometimes it's just like we all have opinions and we all love to talk, but as weird as it sounds, sometimes you just get to the point where the topic has just gone in a way that the person who's next, just doesn't really have anything to say.
Well,
like it kind of has to be organic.
Well, that could be the problem for the guest too, right? Sometimes you guys would ask a question, and I'm like, I don't have a long answer on that. I don't know what to.
Well, and that's fine. So, and that one in particular, the tools. Is there anything that you want to like cut out? Is there anything that you just did not like at all?
The one thing I said at the end, I don't mind that. I mean, again, my tools answer was a little silly. Maybe it wasn't Outlook as a tool. If you're comfortable with that, I'm okay. But the last sentence I said was something like, "But I don't know if I have any other ideas." Like that just felt negative. Like
I'll clean that stuff up.
You clean that. There might have been another sentence or two that I tried to. Have, I don't know, like, in other words, like, you know what I mean by, like, a negative ending? Like I said, I don't really have anything else other than that. That's like a negative ending. And it didn't feel like a smooth ending to that question,
Yeah. I mean, some of that just is organic, right? That's just kind of what you naturally say, and other stuff is just unnecessary, and so you can cut it out. But I'm just wondering the tools. I don't know. Chris and Todd? What did you think about just the topic of tools and how I brought it up? Was it like random? Was it relevant? Was it?
I didn't think it was random. I think it's hard to come up with those tools on the spot.
Yeah.
I actually thought the calendar was a good choice.
No, I thought the answer was awesome.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if the
The
question
idea
was
of
like
one-note collaboration, to me, that was my takeaway. It was the idea of having a calendar and a set to the things,
yeah.
A lot of times,
and then
some
having
tools are
collaboration.
chosen by
You'd be
your,
surprised how many places don't even have that.
yeah.
Or they do, no one ever uses them, right? SharePoint. I was waiting for you to say SharePoint so I could laugh.
Yeah.
Everybody has SharePoint, but no one uses it. It's like, yeah, maybe put some documents in there. Or,
Yeah, good old SharePoint.
I think
Or
sometimes
the-
the tools are chosen by your org, though.
Yeah,
So
Like SharePoint.
right,
Yes.
it could be SharePoint. It could also be, like a sprinting tool, like maybe Rally or something.
yeah, or whatever, yeah. Or
So,
TFS.
so right. So, even though the advice might not be super useful to the person because they say like, oh well, that's great, but my org's already chosen this Trello. I don't know.
Yeah, that's why I tried
So
to
it's
say
tough.
something like it doesn't matter what your, I use Visual Studio. I said, you don't have to use Visual Studio, but some tool to handle code reviews or something like that. There's
No,
a
I
million
think-
different ways to do it.
I think your answers were good answers.
Yeah, I think it was
Best
spot
thing
on.
about
You
the-
need both, right?
have
You
a-
need like you need a calendar, and then which one is kind of arbitrary, but we use XYZ,
Yeah,
right? And I
yeah.
like it because right, it's kind of like, well, yes, you need an IDE. I love Visual Studio, right? It's like you need an IDE, so you're kind of validating that, and then okay, well, I don't know anything about IDEs, so tell me which one you use and why you like it, right? And I'll just, for lack of anything better, I'll just use that one until I form my own opinion.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, there's like a whole show on code reviews. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, and paired programming. I mean, I have so
Right.
many ideas. Like this thing sparked so many ideas.
Yeah.
For me.
I would love to do it. So the other thing I was going to say about bringing you on the show regularly is that we have enough of a problem getting just the three of us together.
Oh yeah.
I'm just wondering if we can do, and the three of us have been talking about this for a while. If we just say like Sunday night at 9:30 or 10 o'clock or whatever, we're recording, and whoever's available, we just do it, right? Unless like there's a critical mass that's not there. But I mean, if we can get, and then it becomes more or less a panel show every week, and then if you can't show up, then you just don't make the show that week. And I mean, if we had you and you were really interested in doing it long term, you could just join and just, right? You don't have to be here every week, but when you want to show up, you just show up and we bring you in, or you could be a regular or whatever. Like, let you drive it.
What I was going to say is, you guys could just turn this mic on Sunday nights, and you guys could just leave. I'll just start talking. I mean,
That works.
you've never known me to shut up. Come on, guys. Sometimes it was hard for me to. I purposely end my statements as well.
Yeah.
Like it's a hard thing. I don't know if I have like the sense yet of how long to talk on the answers to these questions. Like I found myself sometimes going around about it again and go, I think that was how I started this thing. I'm saying it again. Like I hear myself saying it again. I'm like, oh. God.
I think that's what, and Chris has pointed that out a couple times. I think that's when, that's the thing we've really started to listen to is when you've gotten back to the beginning. That's probably a good time to stop. Otherwise, because if you keep going, you're just going to go from the beginning and just say the same thing.
Over and over again.
Loop it around.
Yeah.
So,
Something that I still really have struggled with, and even as I'm talking, I realize it, is slowing down and leaving pauses, because live it might sound a little jilted, but then I'm sure for Jess it is much easier to break.
Yeah.
Because if you're asking a too long-winded question for 90 seconds, but you just keep talking about it, like, hey, I think, and also maybe if you can mention this, and then there's nowhere for Jess to say, oh, I think you got the point across 20 seconds into the question, and I can cut it. Although,
and for what it's worth, that's the first thing that I'm going to do is go back through all of the questions, all of me and Todd and Chris asking questions, and cut them in half, basically, right? Like it.
yeah,
the
I
questions were
recognized
just
a
to
couple
get
of
you
mine
talking.
where it was just too much. Yeah, I said a couple times, I was like, yeah, I didn't need to say that much.
Yeah.
How was my pacing? Was I going
Awesome.
At one point, I felt I was talking fast. At one point, it hit me. I'm like, wow, I'm talking fast.
I wouldn't worry about that.
But,
All the podcast players have, you can slow it down, right? If it's really a problem, you can slow it down. I didn't have a problem
I thought
following.
people speed it up. Isn't that what they do?
Yeah, right, exactly. People speed it up to begin with.
Don't worry, Jess will speed you up so you're 5 seconds faster.
No, that's just me.
So, I mean, whatever you were saying before about, you guys' schedule and stuff like that, I mean, I'm happy to come on again. I mean, I'll just leave it with that. Like, I don't want to, you guys were saying I don't know, Jess just kind of threw out there. I think that, I could just come on anytime I want or something. I mean, I'd rather, you guys can discuss that and,
No,
I don't want to be jumping on too much of the,
we have discussed it, right? We discussed it before we even invited you on, just generally speaking, anyone, like just bringing anyone else onto the show. And after we talked to you about coming on and you were interested, we kind of floated the idea too. And it's just, I mean, I'm being dead honest. It's just the biggest problem is coordinating everybody. Other than that, we want to have as many voices as we want. Like, we don't want this to be our show necessarily, right? Like, we also
be
don't,
like a community kind of thing.
yeah, we also don't want 20 people on so that everybody gets 20 seconds, because that's choppy too.
Right.
And we also want it to be, or the number one thing for me is just consistent. Like, I'm trying to get like once a week, and I'm trying to do everything I can to get once a week. And I mean, lately, the past couple of weeks, I have been the bottleneck. Like, I have had to edit this stuff, and I just haven't had the time. But like, the last thing I want is to bring on so many people that everybody else is like, everybody starts kind of seeing it as optional, and so nobody ends up showing up, right?
Right.
We just bringing you in and just saying, what do you want to talk about? You just threw out like 20 ideas where all three of us were like, holy shit, that's awesome, right? Like, all of these things, and we just started winging off of them, and so we had kind of like stalled for ideas. Like, if we have a list of ideas in OneNote, and it's like, one of them is dead serious, COBOL.net, and things like continuous integration and deployment. There's no like description, just like throwing it out there. We just did automated testing, and like, what's wrong with OOP and backend web APIs and exception handling, and these things have like sat there, and we're like, what do we want to talk about this week? And we had this list of stuff, and we're like, anybody want to talk about this list? No, not really. Nothing is jumping out at me. But then you come in and you throw like 5 things, and we love them all.
Well, that's cool. Yeah, this was fun. Can I say I like talking?
Yeah, right.
So yeah, I'm happy to help out in any way I can. Let's just let me certainly say that. I mean, if I want to be helpful to you guys, what I would say is, like, I could be helpful to myself, or I could be helpful to you guys, right? So helpful to myself would be like, yeah, man, count me in. I'll do this every week with you guys. That'd be awesome, right? Helpful to you guys would be, what if you had a few people that rotated in and out, that were sort of like your regulars, but that way, if you really had some guests that you wanted to have on the show, that someone you really want to talk to, you're not stuck with Andy in the show, because then you have too many people. So you say, in other words, you can invite me.
Guys, we really want to talk to Douglas Crawford, but Andy thinks he's talking this week.
Yeah.
So basically, Andy, you're volunteering to be the stand-in guest. So until we get another guest. That's your name, by the way. You have to say stand-in guest.
That's a good way of looking
at it. This week is stand-in guest.
I am volunteering for that. Again, what I'm saying is I want to do what's right for you guys, and maybe just me joining isn't what's right for you guys. Maybe I think a variety is sometimes really a good thing, or it could just be a bunch of people talking.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's the other thing, is like, we are like a dozen episodes into it, which is pretty respectable. As far as I'm concerned, and I think you guys agree, like, we still really haven't defined ourselves. Like, we don't even really know what. We've kind of gotten into a flow. We're kind of getting to a style, but I don't think we really defined it, right? I don't know what you guys think.
No, I think it's. I mean, our original goal was just to be more real world, be practical, pragmatic, bring that we live in the trenches sort of vibe to it.
Right, and so almost deliberately, like, we're not looking to go out and like.
Is Jess's mic messed up? Are you guys hearing that?
That's the Google Hangout.
Oh, it's the Hangout. Okay, because I only hear it on him and on Utah. Okay.
We're
No,
not
he's using
necessarily
Jess for some reason.
we're not necessarily like going to find like the program manager at Microsoft to talk about, right? Talk about something because they're the program manager. They're making the product, not using it, right? And so we're preferring people who are out there actually doing this stuff and their real world take and everything. Those are the kind of guests that we're looking for. We don't.
Except for our friend Jeff Fritz, who we will have on the show, who is the program manager at Microsoft.
Yeah, but he's Fritz. He's cool, you know.
We're just bringing him on to throw darts at him.
I just liked how he described that. Like, we don't want this guy.
I was actually reading Jeff Fritz's bio.
We want somebody who actually works for a living.
No, but I mean, it's I'm now not talking to the other guys, but like I take a lot of inspiration from shows like .NET Rocks and Handsome Minutes, but like I absolutely don't want to like compete with them, but I think we can do something different. I think we can have another niche, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think your shows have been pretty good. I mean, I listened to a couple of them, and I think they're pretty good. I find it entertaining, but yeah, I'll be honest, right? Like, so do I find it interesting because I know you guys, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's cool, it's Todd. I like to hear you guys talk because I know that's what you said to me, Jess. Is like one of your things is like, it's a chance to talk to Todd for an hour. This is really cool, you know. Yeah. And but I think the show is pretty good, but it's not going to get good just sitting there anyway. Let's face it, you have to have some kind of marketing.
Yes.
And I don't know if you have. Do you have Alvin plugging it for you?
Yeah, actually, because I just told him about it on the Tech Batch meeting, and he's been putting it on Morning Dew every time. I haven't asked him. I've never asked him.
You don't need to.
He does it every time.
You don't need to. No. He gets feeds on all that stuff.
That's awesome. Yeah, I appreciate that. I gotta thank him for keeping me to do that.
Yeah. So whatever, man. It's good fun, man. Love it.
It's funny that you say that because every single person I've asked that I know that I've asked about what they thought about the show, they all say the same thing. They're like, well, I know you and Todd and Chris, and so I love listening to you guys talk, and so it's awesome. And I'm like, well,
I thought we had some negative feedback from somebody.
Who? What?
Aaron.
What did he say?
I don't remember. You brought up some feedback.
His main thing was like, there's not enough arguing.
That, and he thought it was too scripted, I think it was.
Yeah. Well, we were struggling with that a lot at first. Like, we had outlines sitting in front of us.
Oh, wow.
The thing is, we thought it would make it, I don't know, more focused instead of just rambling, but then I think we would then listen to it and say it sounded very jilted, like.
I think an outline in terms of, like, the flow of a show, like, okay, we're going to spend 10 minutes on this part of the topic and 10 minutes on like, that's not a bad idea, but to actually have, and questions are good to have scripted. It sounds like you guys were prepared with questions, which I think is a good thing to have.
That's what we've been doing now. We just come in with a list of questions, like we do a little bit of research on the topic and then just throw up a bunch of questions with no order necessarily in mind, and we just have them ready. So when there's like a lull, we just kind of ask the next question to kick it up again.
Yeah. Well, you have to do that, otherwise you're going to have a lull and you're going to go, anybody?
McFly, or Bueller.
Well, it's funny. We had the one show and we were like, that was way too scripted. We need to, we need to let it flow a little bit more. And then it just went crazy. It just went off the tracks everywhere. We're like, all right, well, let's bring it back. But the one thing that happened in there, and I don't remember the specific question, but it was Todd that was like, earlier on in the show, he starts kind of going off on what kind of seemed like a tangent, but he started talking about something that I had like planned on talking at the end of the show. Like I had a really specific reason, and in my head, like I had a way that the show was going to go. And I was like, Todd's throwing it off. What am I going to do? And I'm like, but how would Todd know? Yeah. And so that's where. After that, I asked in the beginning of this show, was like, do you have anything that you want like in an order? Like you'd rather talk about this later and hold off on that or whatever. And if not, which since then it hasn't really come up, but like, do you have an order that you want to have this conversation in? And if nobody has any opinion on that, then yeah, let's just go and just say whatever comes to mind, and we'll just do it organically. And that's actually been working really well.
Yeah, good. It's cool. What am I supposed to do with this Audacity file?
So save it.
I better hit save.
Yeah,
you save the project first.
Does it save
the
what?
Project?
What'd you say?
Save the project, and then export, save it wherever you want, and then export the audio as a wave.
Right, it says save project is for an Audacity project, not an audio file.
Right,
So,
right.
Okay to that.
Save the Audacity project first, just somewhere, and that's just your original, and then export audio as a 16-bit PCM wave,
Oh, wait, hang on. Let me just.
and then send me that audio.
I'm gonna call this thing.
And of course, Chris has already sent it. He's always on top of it.
16.
Did I export it already? Oh, I didn't.
So save the project. Okay, now you want me to do what?
Export it as a wave. Go to File,
Export audio.
Export Audio, and then choose Save as Type Wave 16-bit or Wave signed 16-bit PCM.
Yeah, that's what it started with. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
I'm just saving it with today's date as the name,
Yeah.
and saving it in Audacity. I guess it doesn't matter.
I mean, honestly, you could just send me the Audacity project, but that was.
I don't have any permission to save. That's funny. Saving music file. No, hang on. Let me save it. Save it. How big are these files going to be?
The exported wave is usually about 400 megs for an hour, give or take. What's mine? Yeah, 360.
Okay, you want me to tag it with anything or not?
Chris, yours was 800 this time. Did you record in stereo?
No, I recorded.
Do you guys want me to put anything on any metadata?
No.
It's now going
I did the same thing. I went to those same settings because I realized I was on CD quality.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that increased it. I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't cause that issue that you had.
Oh, God. I'm just afraid that's going to happen to me all the time now. But we'll see. I'm looking.
What happens?
The whole, my 60-minute conversation came at 58 minutes.
Oh, yeah, that's weird.
It's totally fucking weird. And I just wish I knew what happened. It's fine that it happened. I just wish that I knew what happened so it didn't happen again.
So what do you want me to do now? Email this to you?
Whatever. Put it on Dropbox, OneNote, or OneDrive, whatever.
Well, where do you want me to put it on OneDrive?
Well, I mean, just send me a link. Host it somewhere and send me a link.
Oh. Yeah, I can do that. That's a good idea.
And now I've got 3 shows in the can that I'm not going to have time to edit. God damn it.
It's a thought that counts.
Yeah, I know. Well, I mean, I feel bad that the bottleneck is me, but at least we have them in the can, and I can get them out as soon as I edit them. It's the recording that matters. I mean, it's the editing and releasing that matters too, but...
Will you turn off the Hangout so I can ask you my question? If I forget.
Okay. Bye, Internet.